Is it all doom and gloom? No. At the UN, the progress towards pulling half the world's poor out is being achieved. I mean, unbelievable. I love this, but for you, the great opportunity. And it isn't because of anything the activists did, it isn't about Gleneagles, it's because China and India have wrenched, through economic growth, 400 million people out of extreme poverty. This is genuinely historic. Who did it? You guys. We had the Washington Consensus. There was no consensus. No one agreed to this except Washington. The IMF and the World Bank enforced the Washington Consensus on very weak states who could not produce under the rules of the Washington Consensus, or to make it more grand, the Western model, which was about protection, subsidy, tariffs, onerous. So greed, you and me, just getting stuff. If the check's called in, hell, we'll borrow more, tomorrow's another day. Tomorrow isn't another day, tomorrow is always today. Hubris, it'll always just grow, it's just going to grow. It's just a trick, this thing, it's not a trick, real life. It failed, but it failed because of what it set out to achieve, which worked. And that was to create new markets through this new medium, the internet, the web, instant markets, huge markets. Liberate people and their dynamism and their creativity and their productivity. Liberated. Had only those people in South Ethiopia back in 2003 had that option, which they now do, by the way. The World Coffee Price is now set by those people in Addis, which is fantastic. I never believed it would happen. So where do we go? Well, globalization worked on the basis that it brought huge proportions of the world into the economy. It did liberate them to project their productivity into the global well-being. There's just no question about that. And it's pulling endless amounts of them out of poverty to contribute to the global well-being. But it was asymmetric. The world that we set up was for our benefit. It left out 50% of the world who live on less than $2 a day. You cannot live on less than $2 a day. You cannot have a market and exclude half of them. And if they are not allowed to earn income, how do they buy the stuff we make? And if they earn income, therefore they're producing stuff and we can buy that stuff. I'm no economist, but it's pretty simple. We would never allow that to happen until it was forced upon us. And then the asymmetry became clear. Instability is inherent in asymmetry. Stuff falls over, and it did. You have to find new markets. You must behave honorably. You must at all costs regain the trust that was once there. And the place to go is the people who created this and is its saviour. It was the poor that pulled down the Ponzi scheme of subprime. They could never pay. You're going to give me money? Thanks, dude, I'll take the money. And then when you came knocking on the door, I said, what are you talking about? I told you I could never pay. Just sign this. It was the poor that saved us. The productive genius of the Chinese and Asians saved us. And it is the poor that is the future, because there's far more of them. Europe is not finished. The fastest, biggest rebound out of the crisis was Central and Eastern Europe banks. They've got ancient institutions. We haven't even begun to tap their productivity. The next were the Latin Americans, Mexico, Brazil, pulled up by these giants. The United States sits in the middle of these infant economies, Canada, Mexico, Brazil. That huge dynamism of the American economy. Do you think that's going to stop? Absolutely not. There would be a rush for the unbanked. Everyone thinks Africa's basket case. What happened to me was when I saw your game collapse, I started worrying about aid flows. That the West would renege on their historic promise to the poor. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we all make promises. Some of us break them. But to break a promise to the poor is perhaps the most sacred promise of all. To break it is to kill them. Silvio Berlusconi is a liar. Sarkozy's a liar. Japan has done what it said. Canada has done what it said. Very low base, but they did it. America's done what it said. Britain has done what it said. It's the cheapest soft power you can buy. You buy influence, you buy markets. Britain is withdrawing its aid from China. These new boys, China and India, they want to play the game. Dude, there's a price to put down on the table. That's part of CSR. They can stay in their own regions, but it's all part of pulling up the poor. Charity will stabilise individuals. Aid will stabilise basic health, basic agriculture, basic education. Then we require economies of scale which will cohere governments, allow for taxable incomes so you can pay weekly for your security, your police and your army. And then we get the civic institutions coming up in the rising middle class. Will that happen in Africa? It is happening. Africa has more discretionary income than Russia or India. Did you know that? Africa has 52 cities of 1 million people. That's the same as Europe and more than India. But if you're going to engage in this world, and you must, if you're going to leave here with the sense of what must be done to replace where you were and where you come from, which you must, then you have to face this newer, exciting world. This world that what I discussed all week at the UN happens by 2015 or slightly later. And then you go to the next 50. The next 50% of the world's poor. That's your job. That's your future. That's all futures. You have to commit yourself to this idea of the future. Otherwise, leave. We're sick of being ripped off. We spot it coming down the track now. You want to stop onerous regulation that stops you acting? Making profits which are moral? Then act. Go back to your roots. Go back to who you are and where you're from.